Hey guys, I've come all the way to Times Square, New York to interview probably the most famous man in New York.
Hey, how are you?
Maybe not that famous, but I've
Hey, but I'm huge!
interviewing Dr. Craig Kasper here in New York City. Hey guys, welcome to the inaugural Conversations with Dr. Gosalia. I'm here today with Dr. Craig Kasper, who's the Managing Director of New York Hearing Doctors here in New York City. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So, I want to jump right in, okay? I know we've known each other for a long time.
Sure.
Tell us what LADA stands for, LADA. What is that?
That has absolutely nothing to do with audiology.
Absolutely not.
So everybody's going to be massively bored at this point. So LADA is basically a late onset form of type 1 diabetes. If we think about diabetes, there's typically two types that we're taught. It's type 1, type 2. Type 1, historically, we believe it's for children. Mm-hmm. Children get type 1 diabetes. It's an autoimmune condition. It affects the pancreas. Pancreas is not able to produce insulin. As a result, blood sugars rise. In type 2, usually we see that with adults, might be overweight, a little out of shape. Pancreas is functioning fine, but basically all the cells of the body shut down and they don't allow the sugar, the glucose, to get into the cell with the transport of insulin. Mm-hmm. LADA is kind of in that in-between world. It's typically people who are not middle-aged, but more like 20s, 30s, who are diagnosed with a form of type 1 diabetes. So it is an autoimmune condition. Right. It does affect the pancreas. It is a form of type 1 diabetes that occurs later in life. And I was diagnosed in my late 20s, actually.
Yeah, so it's almost like a type 1.5.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you actually shared your story with the world via this podcast that you created back about mid-2017. The podcast is called The Bravest Life. You can actually find it on iTunes. There's a little plug for you.
Thank you.
I tried to get through all of them. I couldn't, but it was very inspirational to me because back in early 2018, I was hit with a little health scare. And when I started listening to your podcast, it helped me change my mindset, change my lifestyle to become healthier. And hearing these stories of the guests that you were interviewing really inspired me to make those changes. So why did you share your story to the world?
Yeah, well, that's awesome. First of all, I'm definitely humbled and I appreciate the feedback and the fact that it had such an impact on you. That was the absolute intent of doing the podcast in the first place. The other reason why I started the podcast, it kind of came from a relatively selfish point of view. When I was diagnosed, it was very quiet. I didn't really tell too many people about it. I really didn't find that much information. I didn't feel like there were that many people like me, late onset type 1s out there in the world, particularly active late onset type 1s.
Sure.
Thank God for the internet, thank God for social media, because the whole world opens up to you in many ways that are positive, some ways that are not so positive, but I found a lot of really interesting people online. But the reason why I started the podcast was it gave me an opportunity to reach out to people who I might normally not be able to speak to from all over the world who were type 1 or late onset type 1s, who were athletes, who were nutrition experts, health and wellness experts, who could give me information about, okay, how do you live with this? How do you train for races, whether it's a half marathon or a triathlon sprint or a trail run or whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. Most people think when you're diabetic, you can't do that stuff.
Right.
And I didn't have that mindset. So it allowed me and it afforded me the possibility to speak with some of the experts in the world, people who've climbed Mount Everest, people with type 1 who have run across the United States, who've done the Marathon des Sables, which is across the Sahara, an ultra marathon, all type 1s, people who've rowed across the Atlantic in a race, in rowboats. Another guy who's on the first interview of the podcast that I did, his name is Eric Tozer, type 1. He literally just ran a couple of months ago the 7 Continents Challenge. 7 continents, 7 marathons, 7 days with type 1. So talk about inspirational figures. So I wanted a little bit of that in my life. And what that allowed me to do was to ask questions and be able to provide some level of understanding to people who were like me looking for it.
Yeah.
It's just a great opportunity to learn, really, more than anything. Also, and this is probably one of the most important parts of the whole thing, is how do we look at resilience? Resilience is a very important component of health, wellness, business. We're all going to experience obstacles in our lives. We are all going to encounter those things where we feel like we just cannot move past this, or it's just too great of an obstacle. How do we overcome it? What's the mindset? What do we need to do physically, emotionally, all those things? And I got that out of those interviews. And I was able to gratefully share them with a lot of people, including yourself.
Yeah, and it's pretty interesting that one of your longtime friends, Brian Flagger, in fact, even made a comment that he's known you for years, and he didn't even know that you had this.
Yeah. Again, I tried to keep it. It wasn't a conscious decision necessarily. I just didn't feel the need to. And maybe as I'm thinking about this now, and I don't want this to turn into a therapy session, but maybe it was because I didn't want anybody to think that I had any limitations. And I always felt like I was overcoming and working 5 times as hard as the other guy to do things that someone else might do much easier. I didn't want anybody to look at me differently, I think. That's why I shared my story. It was just, I had to overcome that. That was the first step in getting to the point where you know my story. And in actuality, when you're honest and you share stuff like that, amazing things happen. Not only to yourself personally, but for other people around you.
Absolutely. Yeah, therapy session. I'm sure some of our viewers might want me to go through therapy, but that's okay.
So tell me about your mom.
I'm perfect. So speaking of perfection, tell us about the first AUD program you didn't get into.
The first AUD program I didn't get into. Okay, yeah. So we all know a relatively famous audiologist by the name of James Jerger.
I think I know that name.
Yeah, so Dr. Jerger was at Baylor College of Medicine and was instrumental in the whole AUD movement. And the first residency program for AUD was at Baylor, if my memory serves me correctly.
You are correct.
And I remember coming out of my undergraduate program, applying to master's programs, but also there's this thing called the AUD, which at the time I was volunteering for another audiologist, Angela Lovenbrook,
yep.
who was another instrumental figure in the world of the AUD. And she says, you have to get your AUD. And it was this very high bar to reach because there's only one program.
Sure.
And they only were accepting, I think, like 10 students. But I applied, and I think that it literally came back with a smiley face, like, how cute you are. You're not getting into this program. That said, it served as kind of, again, one of those moments where you're like, okay, I'm not going to get down this path. What's my other path that I'm going down? So I went to the University of Buffalo for my master's degree, which was an amazing experience. Jack Katz, Richard Salvi, Donald Henderson, so many amazing people up there. Derek Sanders, who was like the king of counseling at the time. Amazing program. So I was lucky to get into that program as well.
Yeah, I think Baylor's first graduate was Dr. Tabitha Parent-Buck.
Was it really?
I think she was the first AUD graduate.
Oh, I didn't know
country.
That.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, and Dr. Lowenbrook, we have some late night gnocchi sessions. In fact, and I'm on the West Coast, and I'd be on at 11:30 to 12 at night, and she'd be on here in New York.
Yeah.
And we'd be chatting about making gnocchi because she's a fantastic cook.
She is, no doubt.
Yeah. So. Tell us a little bit about your practice here. Actually, we haven't really talked about New York hearing doctors.
Yeah.
Tell us how that started, and it's obviously going very well. So tell us about that.
Going well on the surface, yeah, no doubt. Everybody looks in and says it looks great. It's a business. It's a small business. Like every other practice, we're working really, really hard at it. But I appreciate that observation that we're doing okay here. We're still surviving. More than that, I'm just kidding.
Well, the roads are closed down the street here. I wondered about that, how it's affecting your
That's a really interesting thing, especially we do have our current president's New York City residence right down the street from us. That definitely throws a damper on things at times when there's security all over the place. Roads are closed, he's coming through, but you live with it.
I didn't realize how close it was. I mean, I literally walked from Trump Tower to here, and it's about 2 blocks, and the roads are blocked, and
you can't get through.
You can't get through.
Yeah, you can't get through, and they have these amazing just like roadblocks that pop up on cue. Yeah,
man. But the clinic is doing great. I mean, I've seen a lot of clinics, and even just the way it looks, it's very clean, it's very modern looking.
Yeah.
You've done a great job here.
I appreciate it. Yeah, so there's a lot of attention to detail in the practice, and comes from kind of my creative side of my brain. I'm very much interested in kind of minimalist design, and that goes through everything that we do in the practice. Is we go back to basics, and that's one thing that I say time and time again is we're audiologists and we provide very specific services. We cannot forget though where we came from, because there's a lot of value. There's a reason why things were done a certain way.
Correct.
There's a lot of value in history, and we can't forget that. So I'm very much interested in minimalist design, minimalist in terms of, and going back to the basics in terms of our clinical services,
Sure.
with an eye for the future.
Absolutely.
Practice started about 12 years ago. We started in one room. This wasn't the space we started in. We started in Lenox Hill Hospital in one room, and we built it into this really, really nice practice where we do everything here, from preventive hearing healthcare, work with musicians, to tinnitus, very big in the world of tinnitus. Clearly we're doing things in the world of amplification as well. Vestibular, electrophys is really important in our practice. We're just kind of opening the doors for a lot of really cool services, so we can broaden our net as well.
Yeah. And I'll put the link to your website in the description so other people can see it, and maybe even a link to your Facebook page as well, because you've got some great pictures in there, and diversification is of course very important. You're doing that here. Tell me a little bit about this thing called Flack. We hear about it often, but a lot of people don't know what it is. And I always tease, because I know a few Flackers, and I tease them that they're in this cult. But tell us about what Flack is and how you got involved and how it's helped you.
It is a little bit of a cult. We have our own secret handshake.
And you win trivia bowls, yes.
Yeah, and we see each other from across a crowded room. It's kind of like the first rule of Fight Club,
Don't talk about Flack. Yes.
Don't talk about Flack. What's your next club? Just kidding.
Perfect. We're wrapping up. No, go ahead.
Welcome to New York.
Yes.
No, Flack. It was originally called Flack, Future Leaders of Audiology Conference, and we were the first group. Very, very lucky, privileged to be a part of that amazing group of people. Actually, I remember sitting in the room and just kind of looking around at all the cool people there who I didn't know necessarily. I knew of some of them, and I kind of wondered why I was there in the first place, but. So it was put together. A lot of us were nominated by past presidents of the Academy, and the original purpose, and I believe still the purpose of it, is to take a look at people who are promising young audiologists in the field, and put them in a room together, teach them about the history of the Academy, teach them about leadership, teach them about themselves, to ultimately help them rise up to become the future leaders of the field itself.
Sure.
So in that group, we had a lot of great people, as I said, like Brian Flagger was in there. Our current past president, Lisa Christensen, was also in there. Shilpi Banerjee, who's running for president now. Minnie Broderick, who's on a bunch of boards, super active on the ABA as well.
She was the chair of the ABA, correct?
Super active is an understatement.
I was one of her peons, and under her tutelage and her leadership.
Hopefully she didn't beat you up too much.
She was tough.
You hear that, Mindy?
So, quick round here. Tell us 3 things that people don't know about you.
3 things that people don't know about me. Okay. I used to play bass in a hardcore punk band when I was a kid.
Okay. You look the part. I would have assumed that.
Don't judge.
Okay. Right. I forgot.
But yeah, so when I was in high school, middle school all the way through high school, played bass in a hardcore punk band. We did a lot of recording, got played on college radio stations, and I actually almost did not go to college because I thought I was going to be a musician. Fell into audiology because as an undergrad, I was a communications major, and there was an intro to audiology class, and I sat through that class. It had acoustics and anatomy, 2 of my favorite things. I thought it was a sound engineering class.
Yeah.
And it opened up a whole world to me. That was actually a really definitive moment in my life, was that class. So I used to be a musician. I still play a little bit, but I don't consider myself a musician anymore.
Okay.
At that time and a little before, I was a skate punk, and to that day that really guides my thought process in a lot of things. I was very anti-authority to a certain extent. I like to buck the system a little bit. I'd like to think, even though sometimes, and it depends who you ask this question of, I might come across as a little quieter at times, but inside there's that skate rack punk kid who's still like waiting to do a stage dive.
Okay.
And
We can arrange that.
yeah. Next AAA.
Next AAA.
Gotcha.
New Orleans, yes.
I think that should be in lieu of the 15K that you organized this past year.
Don't bring up bad memories here.
Gotcha. It was actually really good. It was a training run for me, but I was winded. I was running with a bunch of people, and they're just like, we were prepared for 5K. That's it.
Yeah, actually, we have a video that you actually sent us mid-run.
Yeah, well, maybe you can play that for everybody.
Yeah.
Hey, Meat, I have no problem with running a little bit in the morning. The next time you guys organize a 5K, don't let it turn into a 10K, brother. See you at the finish line.
I think Cliff Olson was with me, right?
I think he was further ahead of you, actually, according to him.
He was ahead of me, but we finished at the same time.
Actually, I think you guys were in the last final group to come through the finish line.
Yeah, I think we ended up running to Cleveland.
Well, one of the doctors, Emily Elizabeth, had flip-flops and carrying a baby, and she beat you guys. It's pretty ridiculous.
All right, back to me. This is ridiculous, right?
Yes, I'm getting off track here.
The third thing that people do not know about me is that I am an excellent rapper.
Okay.
Yeah, it's hard. I know.
You're like Lil Wayne, basically, a skateboarder, rapper, punk.
Big Wayne?
Big Wayne. Okay, Big Wayne.
This totally took a turn for the worse.
We're having a good time here. I hope you guys are enjoying this.
It's all good. It's all good.
So do we have proof of your rock band playing days or your rapping days?
I'm sure we could find a video somewhere if you're really interested.
Yes, we are. We're very interested to see that.
Okay.
So where do you see yourself in 10 years?
10 years. It's a long time, but it goes by very fast. Mm-hmm. So right now, been practicing overall in audiology for about 22 years. A lot has changed in that period of time. So professionally, I see myself growing our practice. I see myself grooming the next generation, which we're doing here with younger clinicians, making them super confident, super capable, being able to kind of broaden our service base, not only in New York, but beyond the New York City area as well. I don't necessarily, and I don't know, things can change, and things change every year, it seems, especially in New York, but in our industry in particular. I can't predict where I'm going to be professionally. I can just say that I'm going to continue to work hard to make a positive impact on our patients, on the people who work with me, and hopefully on our profession. Personally, what I see for myself in 10 years is I want to be able to look back and to be able to create something that's going to impact, and we might have had this conversation about impact and as it relates to the podcast. And along those lines, I think one of my desires with that was to how do I have the ability to impact people beyond the patient who's sitting in front of me, the one or two people at a time. How do we impact a greater number of people to make a bigger impact in terms of their mindset, whatever it might be. So I see myself in 10 years being able to create something that will make a larger impact on the world, where I'll look back, or when my kids will look back, maybe even my grandkids will look back if I'm lucky, to say, wow, he had the ability to look ahead. There was a problem to be solved. There were people that needed something to be done for them, and he was able to change the situation for the better so those people can live a happier, healthier, longer life. I'm very much interested in there's a guy, his name is Peter Attia, he's a physician, very much interested in longevity, and I'm very much interested in that as well. And we talk a lot about lifespan, but one thing that we don't talk a lot about is health span, and that's what Peter Attia talks a lot about. You should definitely link to that. Health span is, we might live longer, and there's a lot of science that helps us live longer lives, but are we living healthy lives? Are we out there doing things actively, mentally, physically, for as long as possible? I'm really interested in that space. Yeah. And that's the area I think I want to make an impact in. How it's going to happen, I don't know just yet, but that's really the area I'm looking at.
I thought you'd say you'd get on a boat and go sailing in 10 years, and that would be the.
I don't think that's me.
No,
You know, like
that's
I like to relax a little bit, but I definitely have a little bit of a drive where I'm never satisfied. And I don't think that no matter what my age is, I don't think that I'm going to stop trying to create and do things that are going to make an impact. That's not my nature at all. I can't sit still. But I'll drive my wife crazy if I sit still for more than a day. She hates when I sit still. So.
Well, listen, you're a true leader. You've created an amazing practice here, great business. I met some of your team today, and they're just rock stars. And so,
thank you.
You've done a great job, and you're huge here in New York. Not to steal Donald Trump's thunder there, but appreciate you being our first guest on Conversations with Dr. Gosalia, me. And stay tuned next month as we interview another odd star. Her name is Dr. Liz White in Melbourne, Florida, and she's got an amazing story as well. So thank you, Dr. Kasper.
My pleasure. It's really good to see you. Welcome to New York again. And hopefully while you're here, you get some pizza and bagels.
I'll do my best.
Although you got to stay away from that stuff. It's not too healthy.
It's not too healthy. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.